Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan Von Tobel joins us. He's our senior NBA analyst. He's also the co-host of Hardwood Handicappers, our NBA podcast, which he does with Kelley, Bydlon multiple times a week, and a possessor. Can we say a possessor? Someone who has in pocket Celtics series tickets, Celtics NBA Finals tickets. Right after Game 3 is when he got him. How you doing, JVT? How you feeling, man?
I'm good, although I was getting a little nervous. I thought you guys were staving off talking to me. So
It's another thing you could stave off, but we don't want to do that. We have no interest in staving off talking to you. So let's just start where Kelley and I ended, which is, I guess you've got to be feeling good about your ticket right now. Well, let me start with this question. Are you planning on doing anything with it? In other words, are you just going to let it ride at this point?
Yeah, and look, to be clear, too, I don't have anything series-wise. I do have the Celtics win the finals at just over 14-1. So that's the way I approached it. So, no, I'm not going to do anything. Look, it was a small bet at high odds. It's, you talk about this all the time, right, Gill, in terms of like hedging or doing stuff with tickets. If it's life-changing, it's always a personal thing. It's not life-changing. So I'm willing to let this thing ride and see where it's at. But in terms of confidence, I think it's hard not to, if you're somebody in my position, not to start to feel a little bit more confident because Kelley and I talked about this on the podcast. I'm sure you guys have brought this up many times. If you were going to set up the parameters of a team that could make history, that could come back from what was that 3-0 deficit, the Boston Celtics would fit in a lot of those parameters. A 1 seed down to an 8 seed in a conference finals, a team that could shoot and defend the way that they can. They check a lot of boxes. And the fact that they are now starting to play their game a little bit more over the last 2 games, I find it hard not to be confident. I also find it hard not to be kind of a jackass on social media and start tap dancing on the grave of people because it's just fun, because this is what sports is about sometimes. So, no, I am feeling confident.
I did see you tap dance. This is an aside. We'll get back to the Heat and Celtics in a minute. But I did see you tap dance on some, I guess it was a national media narrative that they thought the Nuggets were a boring team. You got all over that, right?
Yeah, well, and I think, too, look, this is the non-betting stuff. You're a journalist, especially a sports journalist. It's your job to find the interesting stories.
Of course,
so,
yes.
You know what I mean? So yeah. I think it's very lazy for anybody to come out and readily admit, like, oh, they're just not interesting. Well, then you're just not trying and you're not doing your job,
Let me get back to the Celtics and the Heat. So what you said, what I said was, yes, any team that had home court advantage to begin with, who lost the first 3 games but managed to pull out Game 4, you could say this about, right? Like against an 8 seed, where you're like, okay, this sets up beautifully because they have home court in Game 5. If necessary, they'll have home court in Game 7. They'll be big favorites. It could come down to the ultimate sphincter game of Game 6. My point, and the reason, and listen, again, I'll stress this again, both things can be true. The bet can be a good one because mathematically it was a good bet, right? And it is also true that you don't have to play every mathematical edge you find if you honestly also don't believe it's going to manifest. And for me, that's where I sort of stopped with the Celtics because to me they're too schizophrenic, right? Like here we are, we have 2 games to show, oh my God, look at the Celtics, they're so good. But how quickly we can forget what happened in the first 3 games. Would it surprise you at all, the scenario I gave Kelley, would it surprise you at all if by halftime the Heat are up double digits and you're like, oh no?
Not at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's also when that game line was set, Kelley knows this. I chewed on it for a while whether or not to even make the bet, you know, because there was a scenario where it's like you said, I think mathematically there's an edge here. It ties into that overreaction in terms of the adjustment for Game 4, all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I could put a little money on the Celtics win the NBA Finals and watch them just go ahead and just implode in Game 4 like they did in Game 3 and get ousted because they haven't been consistent. So, no, I think you're absolutely right. It's funny in today's day and age, it seems that you cannot hold 2 thoughts in your head at once. But I think you're right. And I think it can be true that they go on in Game 6 and they lose this. But again, kind of going back to like the parameters in which this team is falling under, the other thing that is working in their favor that, again, would help them overcome this deficit that they had at 3-0 is the fact that Gabe Vincent is injured. Yes. You have no idea how healthy he's going to be as we move into that game. So I would agree with you,
Yeah, I agree with that point so much. Like, I think that's sort of this little detail that is sort of getting lost in the shuffle. That appears to be an underrated absence for the Miami Heat. Now you decided to do it for the finals and not for the series, which to me is interesting because it is the Nuggets looming, right? And you feel, I guess, then that the Celtics, I mean, again, it's a play on a number, but do you really feel like the Celtics would overcome the Denver Nuggets in your heart of hearts?
I think they would. I think they're capable. I'm somebody who is very high on Boston, as Kelley knows and as our audience knows. From dating back to last year all the way throughout this year and everything they've done throughout this postseason, and had an overwhelming amount of confidence in them going into the series against Miami. So I do think that is the case. And, look, it was a mathematic play, but it's also like, hey, man, sometimes you just want to do something a little fun. So let's see if we can get a 14-1 shot into the NBA Finals. They're going to be favored over the Denver Nuggets. And then you could talk about positioning yourself and doing some stuff. So all of those things, yes, factored into it. I do think they would be able to handle Denver.
Okay, let's talk about Game 6 in a vacuum here, if you will. What are you going to do with this? What would you do with this if you didn't have your ticket? Or more to the point, is there a correlation between side and total to you?
Yes. So this is one thing that I wrote about yesterday that I've kind of been harping on. It was, I bet the under in yesterday's game as well. So if you're somebody who, like me, does believe in Boston, and I think that these sides in this series are very much correlated to the total. Look at the first 3 games. If Miami is going to win these games, they are generally going to have some outlier shooting performances. We saw it in game 1, 50% from 3, 60% on long twos. You saw it multiple times in this series so far. 3 games in Miami won. 3 games go over. The 2 games that Boston has won, the 2 games go under. Boston, when they beat their opponents, defensive rating and non-garbage time in this postseason of 104.3. The fact that they have a plus 15 net rating, meaning that they're blowing their opponents out when they're beating them in all 10 of their wins. So I think that if you are somebody like me who believes in Boston, you could bet the side if you'd like, or also wait to see what happens with this total and bet this thing under, because I think that very much correlates to the side of what you're seeing here for the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat.
Okay, so if you had to make one bet in Game 6, I'm not saying you are, but if you did, what would it be? What would it be? That kind of thing, a correlated parlay, or would you do a total bet? What would you do?
Yeah, I think, look, I would probably either do the correlated parlay, or for me, the bigger edge would be to play it under the total. I think that especially if Gabe Vincent, whether or not he plays, I think we can agree, this every other day aspect of this series is not going to help you be fully healthy. If you missed a game with a sprained ankle, you're not going to be fully healed by the time you come around for Game 6. And here's the other thing, Gill. One of the quiet things about Gabe Vincent, why he's so important, one, it's the ball handling. We saw the Celtics turn these Heat over 19% of their possessions, but it's also the outlier shooting. He was shooting 47% from 3 in this series before he got injured. I'm not sure if that sustains itself either. So even if Vincent comes back, you see a bump in the total, you can still bet that thing under.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.